So, last night, Konami out of nowhere gave us 7 brand new cards for the Noble Knight archetype, confirming a rumor and absolutely delighting everybody who's a fan of the deck. And the first question on everybody's mind is, how do we use them, especially if you, like me, are an active part of the United Noble Knight community, which has always pushed the build that combines the older Arthurian knights with the newer Carolingian knights, and pushes for a more aggressive mid-range strategy where you still put up a decent board turn 1, but mostly focus on resource control and the idea that you'll kill on turn 3 and in a simplified game state. The new cards are interesting because they actually explicitly specify Infernoble Knight in a lot of their text, something that the first wave did not do, which led many to presume initially that they wouldn't work with the old stuff. That is not technically true, but that does not tell the whole story either. So I want to quickly go over the new cards, give a brief initial impression of them, and then discuss how they fit into the strategy. We got 2 new main deck monsters. Turpin is a extender very similar to the Arthurian knight Custanin without the bad xenophilic lock. This is especially interesting because the xenophobic lock on Custanin only exists as a mandatory effect in the TCG. So it's kind of funny, before they ever got around to fixing our printing, they just power crept him. He is a level 4 named monster, which is incredibly useful for the deck, with the ability to summon whenever something is equipped, making him slightly more generic than Custanin. And crucially, he can summon from hand or grave, letting you use him as a material and then bring him back. This is going to be one of his most potent abilities. He also has the graveyard equip effect of many of the Infernoble Knights, which becomes very relevant in this build. So, the other new monster is, for the main deck, is Rickard. Now, Rickard is a card that is incredibly useful, but when you first read him, you might think he's used in different ways than he actually is. So, he has a graveyard effect. You can banish him. You can do it in hand too, like Astolfo, but you're typically going to do it in grave to special Fire Warriors from your hand and make them tuners. But the more important effect is that when he is summoned, you can revive a level 4 or lower Fire Warrior from your grave. This does put you under a Warrior lock, fairly generic, easy to work with. Now, because this happens on normal, a lot of people initially read him as a potential normal after doing pre-normal summons, but in actuality, where you're typically going to use him is as a special summon mid-chain, and that means you're probably only going to be running one of him. Turpin is something you're going to be maxing out on in almost any build. He is incredibly useful. But Ricardo is going to be a one-of in a lot of builds. Now, if you're looking for more resource, you may push him to 2. There are chains that use him on turn 1, and then either on turn 3 or actually on turn 2 off once again. There are different plays there, and I intend to dive into that a little bit. So 1 or 2 in most builds. I don't see him being a 3-of in any build. So we have Power Crypt Custanin. That's, believe it or not, the only card that we have Power Crypt. So next we have Almace. Almace is an interesting new equip spell. In effect, what it lets you do is sack it to equip a different Infernoble Arms from deck or grave to another monster on the field. It can only get Infernoble Arms, not the original arms, which is slightly disappointing, especially because other support in this wave does interact with the originals. But it's in effect a way to tutor Durandal or Joyous onto specific creatures. It's not the best, it's one of the weakest cards in this set, in fact. However, it's probably still worth running at 1. There are lines you can do, such as equipping it with Braver Dragon, passing arms around. If you end up running boars, it can be useful for setting that up. You also just want names because of that next card, so it's probably going to be a one-of in a lot of builds, but it is definitely one of the weakest. It is in my opinion, second weakest card in this entire wave. The field spell, on the other hand, is busted. Figures, they finally give us a way to reliably access our original field spell, and then they give us a new one. So it is a 500 attack buff to all Fire Warriors. Whatever. Once per turn, you can pay 1,200 life points and add a Noble Arms card from deck to your hand, except for Museum. This is any of the original equip spells, as well as any other cards that name themselves as Noble Arms, such as our ever-busted trap until Noble Arms are needed once again. That's not its only effect, though. Once per turn, if you use the search, you can special summon a Noble Knight out of your back row. And if you didn't summon Charles, you lock yourself into Warriors. If you didn't already have Charles when you did that, that's fine. Whatever. And then the most busted thing of all, none of that is hard once per turn. You can activate new copies and get all the effects again. Museum is an incredibly cracked card. There's no other way to say it. In any other wave, it would be the strongest card in the wave, except we haven't gotten to her yet. Easy 3 of in 60 card builds, 1 to 2 of in compact builds they're trying to fit space in, but it's just incredible. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 40 card lists pushing it at 3 anyway, just because it's that good. Epic Poem of Charles is a kind of side-graded until Noble Arms needed once again. It's got a slightly more versatile summon effect, as its reveal effect, and then its banish effect lets you tutor, which combined with the field spell, you equip from deck and then you can bring it out. It's a very cool card, but it's less accessible than once again, and it is competing with the field spell for searches as well as with an older trap Oliphant. So in practice, I don't think it's going to see play in most builds. It is not an unplayably bad card. It's actually perfectly usable. It's just competing with the quite good card, and it doesn't add a lot to the strategy on first read. As adorable as the art is, it is, in my opinion, the weakest card in this wave, and most people are going to skip it. But this is still early days. Never rule anything out. We got a new Link. A Link 1 with 3,000 base attack, which is an incredibly funny statement. The balancing act here is that it must be summoned with an equipped Emperor Charles, your boss monster synchro. When it's link summoned, you can target a Charles in your graveyard, so in effect what you synchroed it with, or linked it with, it takes that card's name, it takes that card's effect, and then it equips that card to it as a buffing equip spell. In addition to all of that, it has a spell trap negate attached to it. So what this is effectively a way to just stack another effect on top of Charles. It's a funny card because it's the most win more card in this wave by a mile. If you're making it, you've already gotten to the end of your chain. But it's also free, so you're definitely going to run it. I mean, you're going to run it. And the background negate is actually not once per turn, so you can make multiples of him on the same turn, which is incredibly funny. I've never seen this type of boss monster upgrade. It's like a retrain, but not. Very, very entertaining. So we have our Kustanine power creep, we have our Charles side creep, we have our once again side grade, and then we got a sold too. Angelica is the most powerful card in this wave. By far, no questions, ridiculous. And she is almost perfect. She is a level 5 warrior, but she is a noble arms monster instead of a noble knight, which means you cannot use her to summon the Xyz Kings, unfortunately. Even still, her effect is amazing. So when she is special summoned, you can add a card that mentions Charles or Horn of Oliphant from deck to hand. So right now there are 3 valid targets. There's Museum, which is typically going to be your search. There's Epic Poem, and there's Horn of Oliphant, a card that went from unplayable garbage to actually insanely good with this card. It's kind of funny. That's just when she's summoned. But the real effect you want to use her for is that when a card or effect is activated that targets her, or when she is attacked, you can send a Fire Warrior from deck to grave, banish her, and then summon a Roland from your deck or extra deck. Now, sadly, if you summon extra deck Roland, this does not count as a synchro summon. This is a huge drawback, but all the same, it's going to get you your Roland on board for synchro climbing, and it's going to enable it'll put Roland in grave for quick effect equipping, while setting up a monster in the grave, all for the low cost of attempting to equip something to her. She's also intrinsically unimpermeable and unveilable, which is really good, except it means if they have those, we're going to save them for later down the chain. But yeah, she is an absolutely insane card. Now, the most important thing that her existence adds to the deck is the deck is no longer resolve as sold or die. Because we have two distinct monsters that can get us into missing pieces and then combo from there, we're going to be able to play a lot more varied set of lines. Hands are going to be much more fluid in how they can respond to threats. Angelica is fantastic. She also is sort of like Redo in that she keeps coming back onto the board while providing a degree of defensiveness, because you're going to keep replacing herself with Rolands as long as you can keep supplying them. And because she dodges targets, she's a readily accessible warrior material that you can just use for stuff. So she is incredible. So, that's all the new cards, all of them good. If you just play the traditional Fire Warrior big combo turn 1, these cards are great for that, 100%. And I have been doing some labbing on a variant of that pulls more into the United style, because I wanted to try it out. But there are plenty of people who are going to demonstrate how those combos work as they're developed, and that's not really what is, in my opinion, the interesting, fun type of development. So let's look at United with these cards. Now, if your concern was they don't have amazing synergy with the originals, that's not inherently true. They work just fine. The bigger problem is they replace a lot of the originals. What these cards really do is enable the fire portion of the deck to play a lot more like United. A lot of the original Arthurian's rules are now redundant. And what that means is, if you loved United for the flavor, you're probably going to be disappointed in the initial investigations here. But if you loved it for the playstyle, you'll be thrilled. With that said, there are 3 things to keep in mind. The first is that this deck is so much more streamlined now that we have a lot of free slots, and you can use those for whatever you want. If you want to use them for hand traps, that's fine. If you want to use them for generic board breakers, that's fine. If you want to use them for generic Arthurian tech cards, that is also fine. You have readily accessible between 6 to 12, even up to 15 flex slots that can be pretty much anything. And so you can build this deck however you want in our early testing. The second thing to bear in mind is that the playstyle when these cards actually come out in the TCG is unknown at this time. The cards are half a year out. Because of that, we don't know what the format's going to be. That is at least 1, quite possibly 2 ban lists away. It is 2 main sets away, several side sets. The format will look very different. And so right now we're more speculating on possibilities than we are deciding concrete builds. The final thing to bear in mind is that because we are still in the early stages of discovery, the list I'm about to show is by no means final. Instead, we're just playing around with how the ratios work, how we kind of want to lay them out, what potential lines we have, what options are available to us, that kind of stuff. So here's what I've been playing with. And you're going to notice not a lot of Arthurian stuff is still in the main deck. It's sad, but that's kind of where we're at, and I will explain why. These 9 hand traps are just flex spot fillers. I wouldn't actually choose to run those particular cards this format, but it's an easy way to group together a line of generics that will sit in your hand. So a lot of the original cards still have synergy. Kuzny in particular was an early standout, even though I ended up not using him in this particular list, because a lot of your newer cards are going to kind of have you putting Noble Arms equips on the board at some point during chain anyway, and because of that, he's always going to have a chance to drop on the field, but he's kind of supplanted, and I ended up not using him because the lot can be a little awkward to play around still, if only it was optional here in the TCG like it is in the OCG. Brothers still made the cut. His ability to recycle cards is actually more important than it's been in a long time, because resource management is going to be so critical. But Midrao is back to being one of our strongest normal summons. So Midrao can be equipped readily with Durandal, and we have so much access to Durandal now, you don't really need to worry about going for other equips unless you have a situation where you're safe enough that you want to do that. And Durandal is the safest equipped with him because if he is ashed, which was always his big weakness, there is direct synergy out of Durandal into Flint into other plays. So he's a much safer summon that can lead into most of your lines, which brings him back to relevance. Boros, on the flip side, who has been our strongest normal for a good while, has fallen out of favor. And the reason for this is that the newer cards encourage us to get a fire engrave very early on, because we need the abilities that the Infernobles have in the graveyard, as well as the presence for Richard, in order to do a lot of our mid-combo steps. Because of that, Madrite is typically going to want to lead into Augier for most plays, or sometimes he'll go into Richard for a revival. And Boris became a card that you could field, but you would have trouble reliably using him when you wanted to, and you kind of got awkward to play around. I'm not writing him off. He may very well find his way back into the deck as a one-off. We don't really know. It's just difficult to say for sure right now. But yeah, as far as equip spells, we're actually upping the density a little bit. I'm keeping the 2-power generics, triple Durandal. I'm testing around with a couple different options for these slots. ARP is definitely the strongest of the OGs, and Joyous should definitely run as well as, in my opinion, one Almace. As far as other slots, if you even run equips here, which you may not want to do, you have a lot of equip tutoring, and there are other cards that you could put in those slots. It's kind of very up in the air right now. Hot has the most direct synergy with the new cards, and the double attack with Charles, who's regularly going to be pushing 45, is pretty powerful. It's also a reason we're considering Clarent, perhaps. 45 double swing is very easy to access, as well as just a name in Destiny, or I thought about Excalibur for King rank ups. The problem is you often want to use your generic tutor as a wasted tutor on Angie, and she can't be targeted by Excalibur, because Excalibur has to target a Noble Knight, so that's kind of unfortunate. Another way her name is awkward, so that's where we're running the line. Once again, incredibly powerful still. Probably a one of in a lot of people's builds. I'm testing 2 right now for potential lines where you summon like a Richard, revive an OGA, dump a second one. There are lines to get there. I don't know, it might be a one of. And then a single Elephant. Elephant provides 2 very good benefits now that it's searchable semi-reliably. The first is that if you get, let's say, Dark Ruler, it is a form of back row disruption that is still persistent on the board, which gives you varied disruption. And if you don't need to use that, its ability to sack a Roland summoned off Angie on the opponent's turn enables you to summon a whole field of monsters that can give you all the pieces you're going to need for a turn 3 kill. Elephant's actually a really powerful card. It's just never been reliably usable, a lot like Table was in that sense. Beyond that, the deck is fairly reasonable. Still triple Gearfried, triple of both of our normal summons. Single Magi looping him is going to be critical. Triple Best Extender, triple OK Extender, triple other Best Extender. A single Roland, because you want the second name for Angie, and the Surge can be kind of useful for setting up turn 3 stuff. Flint Lady, you always need one of her. She's just such a useful card to have access to. One Astolfo, so many cards that are going to turn him live now. You definitely want to use him. A copy of Bradamant, a card that when initially revealed seemed kind of bad, but with the new stuff, she has a lot of cool lines that we have access to. It's funny, even though we have so many ways to tutor Durandal, tutoring her specifically through Bradamant onto Madrite is very useful for fire setups, and frees up your searches for other things. And I'm running double Ricard in this build. Keeping all your Rotas, Terraforming, and 3 of the field spell, keeping the fusion package, just all good cards. And the extra deck, very up in the air, one of each king. Double is sold, may not be needed anymore, we'll see. Double Link Charlemagne, definitely not needed, but making 2 is funny. Angelica is a card that's incredibly busted, but I'm testing her at 1 right now. She comes back and she's very easily recycled. You have, I think, 9 cards in the main deck that can bring her back from grave if she ends up there. So I think she's okay at 1. I'm testing Captain Oliver in basically my only free slot. The reason is another level 5 that you can use for king plays. He's recursive, and with the field spell, he's actually really good for recovery if you happen to have him in grave, if you get into that late game state, because his ability to revive himself by equipping something in the field combos nicely with the field spell's ability to summon something from the spell and trap zone. So if you have a monster on board, you can revive him, equip the target, and then bring the target back out. You still need a Roland. I kind of want to try 2. If this wasn't here, it would probably be a second Roland. We'll see. Braver because we have access to the Theseus line, a single Charles. If Kashtira is somehow still alive when these cards come out, Charles needs to go to 2. Baron, you're going to be ending on Baron a lot, and then my 2 fusion targets. I like Flame Swordsman, but we're testing Carbonella specifically because Carbonella plus a level 1 tuner gets you Angelica. And Theseus. So that's kind of what I'm testing right now. Again, I do not want to imply that this list is anything remotely final. The cards have been revealed for almost exactly 24 hours. We are in the very early stages of lapping this. But with this in mind, I want to kind of showcase a little bit of how the cards interact, mainly to prompt thought. You know, the more people we have thinking about these lines, the better. Oh god, I hate that it still defaults to this. Yeah, so let's go ahead and give an example off Magite here. And using our lovely field spell, we can go ahead and get ourselves a Durandal. So even if our opponent were to ash us on this summon, that can go into Flint, and then we have our soul. I'm going to go ahead and summon Ogier. And for this, for Ogier, I think I would like... Yeah. I think I would like to go ahead and dump my once again. Let's do that. That's fine. Because I want to show what Isolde can do now. So let's go ahead and search something. Doesn't really matter what. Something we're not going to use. Let's say a Brothers for turn 3. And this is really cool. By sending just 1 and summoning Rickard. Rickard can bring back our 4. And we can make our Angie. Angie can get us another copy of the field if we want it, or can get us our Oliphant. Now, in this case, I want the other copy of the field, I think. So now we need to trigger Oliphant, and I could just activate this and get another equip spell, but I haven't used this, and I don't need Metal Soul at this stage. I'm going to be bringing it back later. Let's go ahead and attempt to target it. And then we will respond with that. And we can dump any of the potential materials that we think we might need. So if we didn't have gear here, we could dump it at this stage and get Joyous in a moment, for example, is one great option. But let's go ahead and dump Turpin. I want to have access to him. And bring out the Roland. Now, we can bring Turpin up. Bring him out. Make our Charles. And Charles does need to get equipped to make our Link. No, we don't want to do that. Now we can make our new Link. No, we're not done yet. But wait, there's more. Go ahead and use this copy. Now I haven't actually used Durandal's search effect, and what I need is a way to get Renault here. So why don't I go ahead and I could get Joyous to recycle from Grave, but no, I think we're going to go ahead and get another copy of Durandal. And let's go ahead and drop this. I want to have protection up. We can bring him back out. And there are probably better ways to sequence this to keep Nibiru protection alive. I'm more or less just spitballing here. And I want that fossil. I have use for it. Now, let's go ahead and make a Baron. So we're pretty good, but wait, there's more. Let's go ahead and bring out a 4. Say, this Madrite that we're done with. Now something's equipped, so I could bring out this guy. Now he's going to banish when he leaves the field, so is Madrite, unless I do this. Yeah, there's not really a reason to make him, honestly, here. It's just extra cards we're using, but it's an option. If there are good warrior rank forwards, because we are warrior lock at this stage, you could make like a Godiva there if you have the space for him. There's options to play with. Also, this should have been done way earlier, just to make sure we have an equip set up somewhere in the chain. But we'd finish off by resolving all of our lingering effects. Angie comes back. Charlie's going to go ahead and set up a target lock. And this is a pretty strong board. But as if this were enough. So we have a pop, a spell and trap negate, a monster negate, an omni negate, a target dodger, a floater if it's destroyed. We have our field spell set for revival next turn. We have once again set up in the grave for a summon. And we have 2 powerful normal summons in our hand. We are in an incredibly strong position here. The other thing I wanted to show is how just Angie alone sets up Charles and once again. So for this situation, I just need 2 warriors on board to demonstrate this. Oh, actually, I opened both of my once agains. So actually, I want one of these in deck for this demonstration, so let me go ahead and cycle those back. Yeah, this is fine. I already showed a Madrite line. You do the same line here. You have 2 great extenders in hand. This is you're pretty much targeting the same exact end board, except I think you add Oliphant to it as well. I want to show a non-Madrite line. This is like garbage line, but it's technically. How does this play out? Is this actually a total brick? This might be a total brick. Oh, no, it's not. Because you have the ability to equip, summon. It might be total brick, actually. I think this card. I think this hand's actually total brick. Can I have a non-Madrite line? Yeah, it's. You wouldn't normally want to use vanilla relief again, but it's fine. It's fine for these purposes. Yeah. So we make Angie. And the key is that you can make her off a soul, remember. But just Angie going into museum and getting any old equip spell. Let's grab Hawk, why not? And using her ability and dumping Ogier. And then using the field spell to summon Ogier out. And then Ogier dumps once again. Just that line alone is our once again dump and our spell trap negate slash popping boss monster, and that's just off the synchro. So what's it prompting me for? Oh, no. The reason that's so important is it means that if everything else you do gets disrupted on the way there, as long as you can actually get to Angie, you can play. As long as you, and Angie is such a uniquely protected card that your opponent is basically, once you have committed to fielding her, your opponent is going to have to play suboptimally from that point out. It's an incredible card. So anyway, those are the kind of basic skeletons of how they interact. Yeah, I showed using that. I showed using that. I showed all the new stuff there. The actual lines, especially what you do when you open this, that, and the other, are still being optimized and worked out. So I don't want to show too much of that here, especially because I kind of rambled on long enough. We're very excited, and I am very tired. I was up all night labbing this stuff. But we'll get there. Once we have a more concrete set of lines and list established, I'll probably do an update to this for the server. I just wanted to make this so people can see what we've been working on, because it is super exciting. I'll do another thing with some replays probably next week or over the weekend. Once I've gotten my list down, I'm heading into games. I'll start doing some replays with that. Yeah, that'll do for now. See ya.